The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the small graveyard where Emily stood, a lone figure draped in black. It was a chilly day in late autumn, the kind of day that seemed to echo the sadness in her heart. The crisp leaves crunched beneath her shoes as she quietly made her way to her mother's grave, each step heavy with the weight of loss. Emily had always imagined she would be in a different place at this time in her life. Just a few months ago, her mother had been vibrant, her laughter echoing through the halls of their family home. Now that laughter was a haunting memory. Just last week they had buried her, and here Emily was again visiting, feeling more alone than ever. She knelt by the grave, brushing away the fallen leaves that clung to the headstone. The name carved in stone felt surreal. It was hard to accept that the woman who had raised her, who had taught her about love and life, was now just a name etched in granite. A deep sorrow swelled in Emily's chest, a familiar ache that never seemed to fade. As she sat there, her thoughts drifted to all the small moments they had shared, baking cookies on rainy afternoons, dancing in the living room to old records, and late-night talks that stretched into the early hours. Lost in her pain, she hardly noticed when the soft sound of footsteps approached, but she felt the warmth of a presence beside her. Startled, she turned her head slightly, her heart racing. A stranger stood there, a tall man in a dark coat, his face partly concealed by a wool scarf. There was something gentle in his brown eyes, but most of all something unspoken. He didn't say a word, just reached out and took her hand. The unexpected warmth of his grip sent a shiver up her spine. Emily's heart thudded in her chest, a mixture of confusion and curiosity flooding her mind. Who was this man? Why was he here? But in that moment, the world around her faded. She felt the tightness in her chest loosen slightly as he held her hand firmly. It was a simple gesture, yet oddly comforting. As the cold wind whistled through the trees, Emily remembered how touch could communicate feelings that words often failed to capture. It reminded her of her mother's comforting hugs, how they made everything seem okay, even just for a moment. Feeling a surge of emotions, she caught herself speaking, "Do you?" The man glanced at her, his expression softening. "I do." His voice was low and steady, laced with understanding. "I came here today to feel close to him." Emily nodded, feeling a strange connection with this stranger. It was like he understood a depth of pain she had kept bottled up inside. It just feels so empty, she admitted, surprised at the vulnerability bubbling to the surface. "Everywhere I look, I see reminders of her." With each word, she let a little more slip out. The man held her hand tighter, offering silent support. "It takes time," he replied simply. His words resonated deep within her. She thought of the photographs throughout her home, the family gatherings, the little mementos her mother had left behind. These objects were more than just things. They were connections, bridges to her mother's love that could never truly fade. They sat together in the stillness of the graveyard, two souls intertwined in shared grief. The sun began to dip lower, bathing everything in a warm, golden light that seemed to wrap around them like a blanket. Emily noticed that in this moment, with his hand in hers, she didn't feel as lonely as she had moments before. "I'm going to hold on to her memories," she said, her voice firmer now, more resolute. "Yes," he replied softly. They talked for a long time. Emily found herself sharing stories of her mother's quirky sense of humor, her love for gardening, and even the silly arguments they used to have over favorite movies. The pages of Emily's memories filled the air between them, and the burden of her grief felt a little lighter. But as the trees began to darken in the fading light, a part of her realized she didn't know how long this moment would last. She glanced at the stranger, seeing traces of her own sorrow mirrored in his eyes. She finally asked, feeling the weight of connection that had formed between them. He smiled gently. "Emily," she replied, surprised at how easily the name rolled off her tongue, as if she were sharing a part of herself with him. "Emily," he repeated, letting her name linger in the air. The warmth of the moment started to fade as the reality of their surroundings set in. Emily felt the chill of the evening air creeping in. Mark must have sensed it too, because he looked toward the horizon where the last rays of sun disappeared. "I should let you go. I know you need time with." Emily hesitated. He turned back to her, his eyes carrying a hint of sadness. "I don't know, but remember that it's okay to feel joy amidst the grief." Tears welled in her eyes again, and she squeezed his hand, finding strength in that simple touch. "Thank you, Mark." The moment felt fleeting, bittersweet, like a gust of wind that stirs the stillness for just a moment before passing. Slowly, Mark let her hand go, the warmth retreating. "Take care of yourself, Emily," he said, backing away slowly, his coat flapping gently in the wind. As she watched him walk away, something inside her shifted. That stranger had somehow filled her with courage. She would carry her mother's love with her, not as a heavy burden, but as a light guiding her through life's darkness. Emily stood there, letting the weight of her emotions wash over her sadness, yes, but also hope. The following weeks were filled with change. Emily kept Mark's words close to her heart. She resumed baking, filling the air with the scent of chocolate chip cookies, just like her mother used to do. She started a small garden, planting flowers in memory of her mother, each bloom a vibrant reminder of the love they had shared. But she also began to seek out the laughter again, the moments that reminded her of joy. She recalled their late-night talks and started a little ritual of her own. Every Friday, she would write down a memory of her mother, a funny story, a cherished lesson, a moment of love. She read them aloud to the sky, feeling her mother's presence with every word. As the first anniversary of her mother's passing approached, Emily felt the familiar ache in her heart return. It was heavier, mixed with a year's worth of memories, but it also felt different this time. She reached into her pocket, and there, resting against her heart, was the small pebble she had picked up that day in the graveyard. With a deep breath, she decided to visit her mother's grave once more. As she walked through the familiar path, her nervousness swelled. What would she say today? Would she cry? Maybe. Would she smile? Hopefully. When she arrived, she found a beautiful bouquet of fresh flowers laying at her mother's grave. There was something sacred about that gesture. She knelt down, and for the first time since losing her mother, she felt a flicker of joy amidst the sadness. Just as she placed her own bouquet beside the flowers, she heard footsteps again. Looking up, Emily was astonished to see Mark approaching from the path, a warm smile on his face. "I thought I'd stop by," he said softly. A wave of relief washed over her, and she couldn't help but grin back. As Mark joined her at the grave, they stood side by side, both feeling the weight of loss but also the stirrings of new beginnings. Emily could sense the small bond they had created, intertwining their grief into something powerful. "It's been a year," she finally said, her voice breaking the silence. Mark nodded. "And you always will." He gestured toward the flowers, the garden they had nurtured together. "She's a part of your story, Emily." As the sun dipped low in the sky, Emily felt warmth beam within her. The stranger who had once held her hand was now a friend, a connection born in shared sorrow. Once again, he took her hand, but this time it wasn't just about grief. It was about healing, remembering, and holding on to the love that never truly leaves us. In that moment, Emily knew that even though the pain of loss was deep, love could bridge the gaps, binding us together in the tapestry of life. And as they stood there, hand in hand, she understood that she wasn't alone anymore. The air was thick with tension, heavy and still, as Emily stood at the edge of the graveyard. She could hear the soft rustle of a nearby tree, but everything else was silent. The low hum of grief filled the air. Friends and family gathered in their dark attire, yet the only face that truly mattered to Emily was the one lying in the cold, hard ground. It was hard to believe that only days ago, laughter had filled her home, where her mother had danced in the kitchen, her voice spilling over with joy. But now that vibrant light was extinguished, and a profound emptiness washed over Emily like a tidal wave. Her heart felt heavy, each beat echoing the sorrow that gripped her being. As she stared at the small crowd, she felt detached from the world around her. Conversations floated by like whispers carried away by the wind. Emily's world had narrowed to the simple act of breathing, her focus entirely on the grave before her. It was a surreal scene, each face turned toward her, their eyes dipped in sympathy, but they felt like shadows, dim reflections of her reality. Suddenly, a figure broke through the crowd, moving with a quiet determination toward her. A stranger dressed in a long coat that flapped slightly in the cool autumn breeze. His hair was dark, kept short, and his demeanor held an air of calm amidst the chaos of emotions swirling around them. Emily noticed him before he even reached her. He was different, somehow magnetic, even in the midst of mourning. She felt an unexpected pull. The stranger stopped a few steps away, his gaze fixed on her face, searching for something. And then, without a word, he took her hand. The warmth of his grip sent a jolt through her, an electric current that momentarily broke through her sorrow. In that split second, Emily felt as if someone understood, as if this stranger shared a part of her pain. It was both comforting and shocking. Was this an intrusion or an offering of solace? She looked up into his eyes, searching for an explanation, but he simply held her gaze. There was an unspoken understanding, a connection that didn't require words. It felt raw and real, as if they were the last two people standing on the edge of the entire universe. She whispered, the sound barely escaping her lips, heavy with emotion. It was a question layered with layers of grief and curiosity. The stranger took a deep breath, his grip steady, as if grounding her in the moment. "I lost someone too," he replied, his voice low and smooth. "I came to find a little peace." Emily could feel the tears welling up again, thick and bitter. She asked, her voice cracking like dry leaves underfoot. His sincerity wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and for the first time since the funeral began, Emily felt a flicker of something resembling hope. They stood in silence, the world around them fading into the background. Around them, the other mourners continued their own rituals of grief, some whispered prayers, some simply stared at the ground. But Emily was in her own bubble, a fragile sanctuary carved from the shared sorrow between her and this stranger. As the wind stirred again, whipping leaves into a mini whirlwind, he spoke. "Grief is strange. It transforms us in ways we don't expect." He paused and looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "But connection can save you." His words resonated like a haunting melody. Emily nodded almost instinctively. "It feels so lonely," she admitted, the cracks in her heart deepening. "Because you are," he said gently. "Your loss is unique to you, but you're not defined by your grief." Emily didn't know how to reply. The truth of his words sank in, but the concept felt overwhelming. Honor her mother's memory. How was she supposed to carry that weight when she could barely lift her head from the grief? She managed, desperation threading through her tone. She needed to know him, needed to cling to this moment, this warmth that anchored her against the storm swirling within. "Mark," he said, offering a soft smile that felt like a light breaking through the clouds. She smiled back, warmth spreading inside her chest despite the chill in the air. "Names have a way of carrying stories," he replied simply, easing into the space between them. "I can see it in your eyes." Inspired by his calm demeanor and piercing words, she began to share. "My mom was everything to me. She taught me how to be brave, to love without limits." Tears streamed down her cheeks as Mark listened intently, his eyes never wavering from hers, drawing out every detail. "I keep expecting her to walk through the door and tell me everything is going to be okay." Mark nodded, his expression morphing into one of deep understanding. "It's natural to feel this way. Grief doesn't have a right way to be expressed. There's no timeline." They stood together, fingers entwined, a bridge between two hearts forged in shared loss. Each word Emily released felt like a stone lifted from her chest, and she realized the weight wasn't just hers to bear, it was lighter when shared. "I guess I need to find a way to go on," Emily whispered, glancing toward her mother's grave. It looked so stark and surreal, a poignant reminder of the void in her life. "But how? You already have it in you," Mark said firmly. "It's about celebrating the love that was shared. Remember the happy moments, take them into your future." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an orange glow over the graveyard, Emily could almost hear her mother's laughter, those joyful echoes of the past. It felt like a balm against her aching heart. Mark asked softly, encouraging her to continue. Emily's heart raced as she thought back to the small things that had made her mother so special. "We used to bake together every Sunday. She loved cookies. I could never get the recipe right until she finally let me take the reins and we started experimenting. It became our thing." Mark smiled knowingly, as if he could picture the scene. "That sounds beautiful," he said, his voice brimming with warmth. "Live," Emily said suddenly, a spark igniting within her. "She always told me to embrace life, to embrace joy." Mark nodded, his eyes shining with approval. "Then let her memory guide you. Celebrate those baking days, invite friends over, bake those cookies, share those moments." The words resonated like a soft drum beat in her mind, reminding her that her mother wouldn't want her to hide away. She would want her to seek joy, even in the midst of sadness. For the first time since the funeral, Emily felt a flicker of determination swell within her chest. Life was still waiting, and even if it was painful, there was a beauty in continuing to live, to remember. But then, as quickly as the moment ignited, shadows began to stretch across the ground. The crowd around them swelled, family members turning toward each other, voices rising with the murmurs of said goodbyes. Emily's heart sank a little as she realized their time was drawing to a close. Mark's grip loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. "I guess we should probably head back," he said, and a hint of reluctance was clear in his voice. With a heavy heart, Emily nodded, wishing desperately that this moment didn't have to end. There was a tenderness in the way they stood together, as if the universe had brought them together for this exact moment, two souls stitched together in shared grief. "Thank you for being here," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. He looked deeply into her eyes, and for a moment felt like time paused. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. I believe in you, and wherever you go, carry your mother with you." With that, he stepped back, their hands reluctantly parting. There was something bittersweet about the sensation of losing that warmth, yet Emily felt empowered, as if the universe had wrapped courage around her heart, willing her to fight through the sorrow. As Mark turned to leave, she found her voice once more. She asked, feeling an urgency to reach out, to hold onto this unexpected connection. He glanced back over his shoulder and smiled softly. "Life is unpredictable, Emily. If our paths cross again, I'll be here." And with those words, he disappeared into the crowd. Emily stood there, rooted in place, watching the others drift away, the weight of the day settling heavy on her. But as she glanced back at her mother's grave, there was something different swirling within her. She felt a warmth blossoming in her chest, a flicker of hope illuminating the shadows. She wouldn't allow her mother's memory to fade into darkness. Instead, she would carry it like a torch, lighting the way forward. Determined, she reached for her phone, a new resolve flooding her veins. It was time to gather her family and friends to create their own little rituals, their own moments of joy. She would invite them to bake cookies, to laugh, to share stories. Emily smiled through her tears, knowing her mother would be proud. The sun had set, but she felt the light of love shining brightly within her. Perhaps sadness and joy could exist together, swirling like colors on a canvas only she could see. And from that day forward, Emily decided to live, not just to survive. She would embrace life, allowing her mother's spirit to surround her, guiding her every step. Because in the end, love never truly leaves us. It simply transforms, reshaping our world through the memories that we hold dear. Wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the weight of 1,000 whispered goodbyes. A lonely figure stood at the edge of the funeral, cloaked in black, their eyes locked onto the small grave that seemed to sink further into the earth with every passing moment. It was a cold autumn afternoon, the kind that chilled not just the bones but the very soul, where sorrow filled the air like a dense fog. Sarah knew she should be surrounded by friends and family, their comforting presence wrapping around her like a protective sheet. But instead, she felt isolated, every tear she had wept carving out deeper hollows in her heart. The small crowd around her murmured softly, their words a distant echo, nothing more than white noise reverberating against her grief. And then, amidst the sea of sorrow, she saw him. A stranger wandered in, quietly stepping through the gathering, his presence almost ghost-like. He was tall, with tousled hair that danced with the wind, and his dark coat seemed to absorb the late afternoon light, giving him an otherworldly quality. She felt an inexplicable pull toward him, as if he was not just another face in the crowd, but a beacon meant for her alone. He paused a few steps away, making direct eye contact with her. For a moment, the world around her faded entirely. Her breath caught in her throat, and for the barest of seconds, nothing else mattered. Without uttering a single word, the stranger reached out and took her hand. The warmth of his grip was startling. It jolted her back to the present, and she felt the warmth rippling through her fingers, reaching deep into her heart, enveloping the raw, jagged edges of her sorrow. It was an unspoken promise, you are not alone. Instinctively, she squeezed his hand tighter, holding on desperately, as if he could absorb the pain swirling within her. He didn't say anything at first, his eyes simply reflecting a depth of understanding that she had long since given up on finding. The sincerity in his gaze felt like an anchor in the storm that raged inside her. Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. It was a question filled with curiosity, but also with hope that maybe this stranger had come to guide her through her darkest hour. I'm just someone who understands, he replied, his voice low and soothing. The confession hung in the air, heavy and tangible, as if it filled the space between them. For a moment, Sarah felt a connection, a bond formed through silent grief. Their surroundings faded further into the background, and all that mattered was the hand they held, locked together against the fierce winds of loss. Why are funerals so? She finally managed, fighting against the tears that threatened to spill once more. His brow furrowed, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Grief can be a lonely journey. It's like being on a giant ship surrounded by people, but your heart is lost in the depths of the ocean. Sarah nodded, the metaphor striking her like a lightning bolt. Yes, that was exactly how it felt. She had spent so many nights tossing and turning, reliving her last moments with her grandfather, the man who had raised her, who had been her anchor. The laughter they shared, the lessons he taught her, the weight of those memories felt suffocating sometimes. She turned her gaze back to the grave, and the tears began to flow freely. I miss him so much, she whispered, vulnerability spilling over as she let the stranger into her world for just a moment longer. He was my light, my guide. His grip tightened slightly around her hand, grounding her. Take it one step at a time. Remember the love, the laughter. He wouldn't want you to lose yourself in grief. She looked back at him, and in that moment, something in his eyes shifted. He seemed to embody all the love and warmth that her grandfather had once represented. The realization that she wasn't alone, however fleeting, shone like a guiding star in the dark. She asked, her voice trembling, shaking with fear. The memories are safe as long as you keep them close, he replied. It's okay to grieve, to feel deep sorrow, but it's also vital to celebrate the life he lived. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the graveyard in brilliant shades of orange and gold, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere. As the light waned, Sarah felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. She thought of the happy moments she had shared with her grandfather, the fishing trips, the bedtime stories, and those cherished afternoons spent in the kitchen baking cookies that smelled like childhood. She asked hesitantly, instinctively seeking his reassurance. Absolutely, the stranger said without hesitation, passion radiating from his words. His love for you doesn't disappear just because he's gone. Sarah took a deep breath as his words soaked into her. She realized that perhaps this stranger's presence was meant to be a lifeline, a gentle nudge back into the bright memories that had recently felt dim. She felt lighter, more grounded with each word exchanged. Feeling brave, she ventured on. Liam, he said, a slight smile breaking across his face, and you're Sarah. As they continued to speak, a rhythm emerged, a familiar dance of shared stories and unguarded emotions. They discussed the triumphs and losses, the joy and sorrow that weave together the fabric of human experience. You know, Liam said, the sun casting shadows that danced around them. Life is a series of stories. We're all just navigating our chapters, and while some are full of joy, others dive deep into grief. At that moment, Sarah realized how powerful connections could be, how even a single interaction could illuminate dark corners of the soul. I really needed this, she confessed, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you for being here, for holding my hand. He chuckled softly, a sound that felt like a gentle breeze through the trees. But just then, a bustling movement caught her eye. Some mourners were cleaning up the chairs and packing away flowers. Their time together was dwindling. A sense of urgency enveloped her as she searched his face. She asked, suddenly fearing the idea of losing this newfound support. Liam nodded, though his expression was tinged with sadness. I'll be okay. We all have our paths to walk, but remember what we talked about. As she prepared to let go of his hand, an unexpected wave of fear surged within her. But wait, Liam paused as he looked deep into her eyes as if searching for something. You'll always find what you need when you seek it. With that, he slipped his hand away, and as he turned to leave, Sarah's heart sank. How could a stranger affect her so much in such a short time? She felt teetering on the edge of despair again, the reality of the grave before her returning in full force. She called out before he could walk away, desperation creeping into her voice. Would you come back? He turned, a faint smile gracing his lips. If paths cross again, I'll be here, but for now, it's time for you to honor your grandfather's memory. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a whisper in the wind. For a moment, Sarah felt a choke in her throat as she watched him go. And then, without thinking, she pressed a hand to her heart, holding on to the warmth of their connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she looked back at the freshly turned earth, her grandfather's resting place. This time, she wouldn't walk away defeated. She would carry his spirit with her everywhere she went. In the following weeks, Sarah began to embrace the idea of living through her memories. She organized family gatherings, creating a space for laughter and light in the shadows of grief. She invited her cousins over for baking nights, replicating those cherished cookie recipes that her grandfather had shared with her, making the house smell like love and nostalgia. In those moments, she often thought of Liam, the way he had held her hand without judgment, the way he had guided her through her sorrow. Each time the doorbell rang, her heart raced a little, wondering if he might come walking through the door again. As each cookie came out of the oven, she felt a little bit closer to her grandfather. Every laugh shared reminded her that while one chapter had closed, another was beginning to unfurl. The colors of her life were coming back, brightening even the darkest corners of her heart. One golden afternoon, 3 months after that fateful funeral, she stood in her kitchen with flour on her nose and laughter echoing around her. The doorbell rang and her heart skipped a beat, nerves electrifying her as she approached the door. What if it was Liam? She opened it to find a familiar silhouette standing before her, framed against the warmly lit background of her home. She exclaimed, joy flooding her chest. He said with a grin, holding a small box of cookies. I came by to tell you that I've been thinking about you, about your journey. Giddy with excitement, Sarah stepped aside, inviting him in. You have no idea how much I've missed you in our chat, she admitted, leading him to the kitchen where her cousins continued baking. Looks like you've been busy, he observed, taking in the cheerful chaos surrounding him. Every cookie baked is a memory cherished, she replied. As they shared stories, laughter flowed freely like warm honey, enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth. Every moment spent together began to weave a new chapter in both their stories, one filled with hope, light, and the promise of new beginnings. Days turned into nights and nights into memories, but through it all, the connection they had formed remained steadfast. In this place where flowers bloomed and laughter reigned, Sarah learned that love stretched far beyond loss, and with every cookie she baked, she discovered a balance between joy and grief, allowing both to coexist. And in the end, she realized that it was never truly about saying goodbye. It was about saying hello to the life that continued to unfold ahead of her, guided by the light of those who loved her, those who would never truly leave. The rain fell in heavy sheets, blurring the world into a haze of gray. Clusters of mourners huddled under umbrellas, their faces a mix of sorrow and respect as they gathered around the small grave. Each droplet seemed to weep alongside them, echoing the sadness that hung in the air. Julia stood at the forefront of it all, her heart clenched tightly in her chest. Her world felt as drenched as the ground beneath her feet, heavy with loss. Today marked the end of an era. Her father, once the strongest man she knew, lay in a casket adorned with simple flowers. He had been the protector, the source of laughter, and the guiding force in her life. Now he was gone, leaving behind a gaping void that felt impossible to fill. As the words of the officiant floated around her, she fought to focus. The tone of his voice echoed, but the meaning slipped through her fingers like water. All she wanted was to grasp onto the memories, the way he used to tell her bedtime stories, the warmth of his hugs after a long day, the advice he shared on becoming a better person. Each recollection felt like a thread unraveling, lost in the chaos of grief. Suddenly, her breath hitched as she noticed a figure move toward her amidst the crowd. He looked strikingly out of place, dressed in a dark coat that seemed to absorb the rain instead of repelling it. His hair fell in soft waves, framing a face that was both familiar and foreign. There was a calm intensity in his eyes that pierced through the fog of sadness surrounding her. Without saying a word, the stranger stepped closer and reached out his hand. Julia's voice came out in a fragile whisper, shock washing over her. Here, at her father's funeral, a stranger had approached, breaking through the barrier of grief, seemingly drawn to her like a moth to a flame. I'm here to share a moment with you, he replied softly, his voice cutting through the rain as he took her hand gently. His grip was warm, grounding her in a way that nothing else could. In that instant, she felt the energy shift, her overwhelming sorrow giving way to an unexpected spark of connection. The simple act of holding hands felt monumental in that moment, as if he understood the depth of her loss more than anyone around her could. Julia looked into his eyes, searching for answers. She could feel the weight of her grief still coursing through her words, but there was also curiosity bubbling beneath the surface. I can see your pain, he said gently. I lost my father a year ago. His admission was like a lifeline. A piercing clarity washed over Julia. Here stood someone who understood, someone who shared in the heavy burden of grief. It was almost a revelation. She didn't have to be alone. She didn't have to navigate this path by herself. It hurts so much, she confessed, tears spilling down her cheeks as the words tumbled out. I know, he replied, his voice steady yet soft. Grief transforms us. It challenges us to find strength in our vulnerability. It's okay to cry, to feel broken. The rain fell harder, but in that moment it felt irrelevant. The world around them faded away. With every heartbeat, the storm of sorrow began to ebb, replaced by the warmth of connection. Julia asked, her heart aching with the uncertainty of the future. Yes, it does, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. It doesn't mean you forget. It means you learn how to carry the love with you. As he spoke, Julia thought of her father, his infectious laughter, the stories he told, the way he made everything seem possible. The tears kept flowing, but now they felt different, lighter, almost cathartic. She asked, her voice barely a whisper now, as if sharing a secret. Anything, he encouraged. I miss him so much, I just don't know how to move forward without him, Julia admitted, vulnerability flooding her voice. Those mornings we spent together, drinking coffee. I understand, he said, but those moments, they're still with you. Every time you think about them, he's there. The warmth of his words wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. For the first time since her father's passing, Julia felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her. It was okay to cherish those memories. It was okay to carry her father's spirit with her. Just then, the officiant's voice returned, pulling her attention back to the funeral, reminding her of the finality that lay before her. It took her a moment to gather herself. The stranger's presence had brought light into her darkest hour, but now there was a desperate need to say goodbye. Thank you, she said, looking at him with profound gratitude. Thank you for being here. Anytime, he replied, releasing her hand slowly, as if letting go of a fragile treasure. I'll be close by, and if you ever need someone, just remember this moment. As he stepped back, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Even though they hadn't talked for long, she had felt a bond form through their shared pain. It was like a lifeline amid the storm, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this world. As she turned her gaze back to the casket, she thought of her father again, remembering the laughter that filled her childhood. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, picturing his smile, feeling the warmth of his love wrap around her like a comforting blanket. When she opened them, the rain had eased and the sky appeared a little brighter. The funeral proceeded, and for the first time, Julia felt like she could breathe. The words of remembrance floated around her, but instead of drowning in sorrow, she made a choice. She would think of her father with joy, not just sadness. As people began to disperse, Julia found her feet moving instinctively toward the stranger. She called out, the urgency in her voice pulling at her heart. Eli, he replied, turning to face her with a kind smile. Eli, she repeated, savoring the name. His eyes twinkled with an understanding that surpassed words. So do I, Julia. With that, he stepped away, leaving her with a newfound sense of purpose. She watched as he blended into the crowd, disappearing from view. But the connection they had shared left echoes in her heart, the promise that the love of those who had passed on never truly left. Days turned into weeks, and Julia began to navigate her grief with a new perspective. She didn't erase the sadness. Instead, she wove it into the fabric of her daily life. Each morning, she would brew a pot of coffee, setting an extra cup at the table for her father. She would recount stories aloud, laughing as if he were sitting across from her, sharing the warmth that still lingered despite his absence. Time moved forward, and every time a memory of her father crossed her mind, it felt like a reminder of love rather than a weight of sorrow. Each joyful moment became a tribute to him, a living memorial that filled her heart with light. Months later, on a crisp autumn day, Julia found herself wandering through a local market. The vibrant colors of pumpkins and flowers reminded her that life was still bursting with beauty. As she ambled through the stalls, savoring the laughter around her, a familiar figure caught her eye across the way. Eli stood by a flower stall, the corners of his mouth lifting into a smile as their eyes met. She exclaimed, rushing toward him, her heart racing. She could hardly believe it. It felt like fate had stepped in. Julia, he said, his voice warm and inviting. I never thought I'd run into you again, she admitted, a mix of surprise and elation lighting her face. Life has a funny way of bringing people together, he replied. She nodded, the weight of her grief now transformed into something beautiful. I have. I'm proud of you, Eli said genuinely, and for a moment they stood together, enveloped in a warmth only understood by those who had touched the depths of grief. Over the weeks that followed, Julia and Eli's connection blossomed into a friendship neither had anticipated. Together, they explored new places, shared stories, and even baked cookies, her father's favorite recipe. Each laugh echoed with joy, intertwining their memories with newfound experiences. Julia found herself falling for Eli, not only for his kindness and understanding, but for how he had entered her life at a time when she needed someone the most. He was a light that guided her through the darkness, and she couldn't help but wonder if their paths had crossed for a reason. One evening, as they strolled through a park, the golden light of the setting sun shining brightly, Julia turned to Eli. I believe that love never truly leaves us. It transforms and shapes us, guiding us through the toughest of times, she said, feeling emboldened by their shared journey. Eli paused, his gaze steady and sincere. I couldn't agree more. As they approached a bench, Julia felt her heart race. Something shifted in the air. She glanced at him, and the moment felt heavy with potential. I'm really grateful for you, Eli, for everything, she said, her heart pounding. I'm grateful for you too, he replied, his eyes sparkling with warmth. Slowly, he took her hand again, that familiar warmth spreading between their fingers. The gesture held a different meaning, now one filled with the promise of tomorrow. He asked, his tone laden with sincerity. Julia smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. I do. Then let's make a promise, he said, his voice steady and clear. Together, she echoed, her heart soaring. That evening, as they watched the sunset cast colorful hues across the sky, Julia felt a deep sense of peace wrap around her. She looked at Eli at their entwined hands and knew she had found a kindred spirit. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wouldn't have to face it alone. With love, laughter, and healing, they would navigate life's unpredictability together. And in that moment, she understood that love, like the rain that had once drenched her father's funeral, could wash away sorrow, nurturing new beginnings and sustaining the spirit of those who would always remain in their hearts. Rain poured relentlessly as the mourners huddled under umbrellas, their faces shrouded in grief as they gathered around the fresh grave. Shadows danced beneath the trees, the air thick with an ache so profound it felt almost unbearable. Lydia stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart heavy as she faced the final resting place of her sister, Clara. It had been a sudden loss, one that none of them had seen coming. One moment, Clara was alive, smiling, laughing, planning for the future. And then in the blink of an eye, she was gone. The world felt wrong, unrecognizable, leaving Lydia in a spiraling whirlwind of emotions. Anger clashed with disbelief, and tears threatened to spill over as she fought to maintain her composure. No one can understand this pain, she thought, her gaze fixed on the wooden casket that seemed to sink deeper into the earth with every heartbeat. As words of comfort floated in the air, muffled under the patter of raindrops, Lydia felt more isolated than ever. Each word felt like a hollow echo, a reminder of what she had lost. While friends and family gathered to share in their sorrow, she felt completely alone, a specter haunting the edges of her own funeral. Just as the officiant spoke words of closure, Lydia's attention drifted to the edge of the crowd. A figure stood apart, cloaked in shadows. He was tall, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, his face half hidden under the brim of a wide hat. Despite the chaos of emotions swirling around her, there was something oddly magnetic about him, something that pulled her thoughts away from her despair. The moment shifted when the stranger began to move toward her. There was a grace in his steps, an air of determination that caught Lydia off guard. He stepped into the rain without hesitating, hands by his sides, his gaze fixed directly on her. It felt surreal, as though he was wading through the heavy atmosphere with a purpose known only to him. Without a word, he reached for her hand. Lydia's breath caught in her throat as their fingers intertwined, warmth spreading like a gentle flame, igniting a long-extinguished spark. She looked up, bewildered, into his eyes, searching for answers, searching for clarity. Who is this man? Why was he here? The world spins on, he finally said, his voice low and soothing, cutting through the haze of grief enveloping her. But in moments like this, it's okay to just stop. It was stunning how those simple words resonated within her. For weeks, she had put on a brave face, trying to navigate the tidal wave of loss without truly allowing herself to grieve. But here was a stranger who seemed to reach deep into her heart, sensing the raw pain, urging her to let it wash over her like the rain cascading down. I don't even know you, she stammered, confusion mingling with appreciation. Why, I'm just someone who understands, he replied, unwavering, his grip firm yet gentle. I lost someone too, a mother, years ago, but the memories are still fresh. His honesty was disarming. Slowly, the fog began to lift from Lydia's mind. She asked, her voice cracking under the weight of her own vulnerability. By remembering, he said softly, by allowing the love to grow. Loss teaches you many things, but the greatest lesson is to carry that love forward. Tears streamed down Lydia's face as a flicker of clarity ignited in the depths of her sorrow. She had spent so much time mourning Clara's absence that she had forgotten all the moments that made Clara who she was, the laughter, the late-night talks, the shared secrets of childhood. Every moment becomes a thread, he continued, woven into the fabric of your life. You have to hold on to the threads. Lydia asked, the vulnerability in her voice raw and exposed. It will hurt, he replied, his gaze steady and unwavering, but the ache will transform. It will shape you in unexpected ways. It will remind you to live fully, to honor their spirit with each step you take. The rain continued to fall, but it felt different now, almost refreshing. Through her tears, Lydia began to absorb his words, letting them settle like a salve on her wounded heart. She thought of Clara, her infectious laugh, her hopeful spirit. And for the first time in weeks, a small smile crept onto Lydia's lips, a beacon of warmth amidst the storm. Thank you for this, she said, her voice trembling. I'm glad I could be here, he replied softly. You're stronger than you think. As they stood there, hand in hand, something shifted within Lydia. It was as if the cracks in her heart were slowly knitting together, allowing light to seep in where darkness had once reigned. Time felt suspended, each heartbeat echoing with newfound hope. but as the mourners began to drift away, the moment began to slip through her fingers like a dream fading upon waking. She called out as he took a step back, instinctively reluctant to let go of that connection. "Jack," he said, a hint of a smile breaking through his somber demeanor. "I'm Lydia," she replied, savoring the sound of her name on her lips in this moment of vulnerability. "Good to meet you, Lydia," he said, letting go of her hand. As he retreated back into the crowd, Lydia felt a profound sense of loss wash over her. But it was a different kind of loss, one that urged her to reflect, to honor her sister instead of drowning in despair. "This isn't the end," she whispered to herself, staring at the now empty space where Jack had stood. Days turned into weeks, yet the echo of that moment remained vivid in her heart, a constant reminder that she was not alone in her grief, a thread woven into her journey. She began to find solace in small acts of remembrance, baking Clara's favorite cookies, planting flowers in her garden, and sharing stories with friends about the moments that had made them laugh. In those moments, Lydia felt her sister's presence guiding her, reflecting the love they had shared. It became easier to breathe, the weight of grief slowly lifting like morning mist dissolving in the sunlight. One evening, as she prepared to honor Clara's birthday, the doorbell rang. Lydia opened it to find a familiar face outside. Jack stood there, a smile gracing his lips and a bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. He exclaimed, almost as if he were bringing the sun along with him, "I thought I'd check in." "I've been healing," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "It's been a difficult journey, but I feel lighter." "That's wonderful to hear," Jack said, stepping inside. As they sank into a comfortable rhythm of conversation, Lydia realized how much his presence meant to her. There was a warmth in the air that felt comforting, as if they were sharing a kindred bond forged in pain and healing. Throughout the evening, they recounted stories of loss and remembrance, each tale reinforcing the idea that the love of those we lost continues to shape our lives. In every story Lydia shared about Clara, she felt less a weight and more a joy in remembering. "This is exactly what Clara would have wanted," Lydia said, laughter spilling over as she told stories of Clara's notorious baking experiments that often went hilariously wrong. "And I like to think she's watching over us, laughing at how we bring her stories to life," Jack added. As laughter danced between them, Lydia noticed a change in Jack. He had gone from a stranger offering comfort to someone who felt like a steadfast friend, a guiding light in her ongoing journey. Their conversations began to flow effortlessly, and she found herself leaning into that connection more each day. One night, while they sat under the stars on her porch, Lydia felt a sudden rush of emotions. She asked, turning to face him, curiosity swirling in her eyes. Jack paused for a moment, the starlight catching the warmth in his gaze. "Some moments you just can't ignore," he replied thoughtfully. "I knew I had to be there, not just for you, but for myself." Silence blossomed between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts and possibilities. In that instant, Lydia realized how deeply their lives had entwined since that day. Jack wasn't just a comforting presence, he had become a significant part of her healing journey. The next evening, as they prepared to swap more stories, Lydia took a deep breath, feeling a surge of bravery wash over her. "I feel connected to you in a way I can't explain," she admitted, her heart racing. Jack turned to her, sincerity flooding his expression. "You've helped me too, Lydia." Their eyes locked for a moment, electric energy crackling between them, and in that stillness, Lydia felt an undeniable pull, a connection deeper than she had ever expected. It was then she knew their paths had intertwined not just by chance but by fate. Days passed and their bond continued to grow stronger, wrapping them in a warm cocoon of friendship built on shared experiences. Each laugh shared, each tear shed, wove the fabric of their lives together like threads of a tapestry. On a warm evening, as they strolled hand in hand through the park, Lydia felt a surge of courage bloom in her heart. His expression softened, a knowing smile blooming across his lips. Absolutely, grief and love can coexist. In fact, they often do. As their conversations deepened, Lydia began to see that love wasn't just about romance. It was about shared experiences, about the people who enrich our lives, those who help carry the weight of our burdens. As autumn faded into winter, creating a canvas of crisp air and soft snow, Lydia and Jack decided to take a weekend trip to a nearby cabin. The crackling fire inside felt warm and inviting, wrapping them in a blanket of comfort as they settled in for the night. Under the twinkling stars outside, they shared stories of the past, of goals for the future, and of love lost and found again. As the night deepened, something shifted in the air. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring them together for a reason. "I used to think that closure meant forgetting," Lydia said softly, her gaze fixed on the flames. "But now I see it differently. It's about keeping the love alive." Jack nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're exactly right." And in that moment, as they shared their secrets, their laughter, their hopes, Lydia felt a connection unlike any she had ever experienced. She reached for Jack's hand, intertwining their fingers, and she knew this wasn't just about friendship, it was evolving into something deeper. Weeks turned into months, the seasons shifting around them like the rhythm of life itself. Bond solidified, a tapestry woven with shared experiences and beautiful memories, reflective of both loss and love. One evening, as they sat on Lydia's porch under a blanket of stars, she turned to Jack, her heart racing. "You've changed my life," she said earnestly. Jack's gaze held hers, a spark flickering between them. In that moment, Lydia felt the courage bubbling within her, a sense of empowerment that propelled her forward. "I think I'm falling for you," she confessed, her heart pounding. Jack smiled, warmth radiating from him. "I think I'm falling for you too, Lydia." As they leaned closer, the world around them seemed to disappear, the night closing in, enveloping them in a cocoon of hope and understanding. Their lips met softly, igniting a fire within that felt both new and familiar, a celebration of everything they had gone through together and the bright future ahead. From that night on, they began a new chapter, one where love could thrive alongside their memories of loss. They honored Clara whenever they could, celebrating her life, sharing stories, and allowing her spirit to guide them in their journey forward. In the end, Lydia learned that life isn't about forgetting the past, it's about weaving it into the fabric of your future. It's about embracing the connections that come our way, even from unsuspecting strangers, and allowing them to shape our hearts in ways we never thought possible. Love is powerful, transformative, and it has a way of finding us when we least expect it. And as Lydia walked forward into the uncertain light of today, she held on to every thread of joy, of sorrow, of laughter woven into the tapestry of her life, knowing with certainty that she would carry Clara's love and memory with her forever. The rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking the earth and mingling with tears shed on the occasion of a final farewell. Sarah stood among the sea of black umbrellas, the weight of the world settling on her shoulders. Today was supposed to be a time of remembrance, but all she felt was an aching void where her heart used to be. Her mother had been everything to her, a guiding light, a safe harbor in life's storms. Yet now that light was extinguished, and Sarah was left trying to navigate a world cloaked in darkness. As she stared at the casket, the reality of her loss crystallized into something truly unbearable. She couldn't remember the last time she laughed or even smiled. The officiant's voice droned on, a distant echo of words that felt foreign and hollow. The familiar faces around her looked equally lost in their sorrow, some whispering comforting phrases while others wiped away their own tears. Everyone was trying so hard to honor the woman they knew, but for Sarah, the memories felt like sharp knives, cutting deeper into her chest with every passing minute. Suddenly, something shifted in her peripheral vision. A figure approached from the edge of the crowd, a stranger, unacquainted with the tangled web of grief surrounding them. Dressed in a simple, dark coat, the man moved with purpose, making his way toward her amidst the sea of mourners. Sarah could feel her heart race, an odd mix of curiosity and anxiety sparking within her. He stopped just a few feet away, and for a moment their eyes locked. There was an intensity in his gaze, an unspoken understanding that made the noise around them fade. Without uttering a single word, he extended his hand toward her. She thought, confusion mingling with intrigue. The crowd moved like a tide, but in this moment it felt as if he existed in a world separate from the chaos swirling around them. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. The warmth of his grip sent a shiver down her spine. It was like discovering a lost piece of herself that had been buried under grief. And there they stood as the rain poured down, two strangers connected in a moment that felt infinite. Sarah wondered, her mind racing, but the truth was undeniable. Beneath the turmoil of her emotions, there was a flicker of hope, a small flame reignited in the depths of her despair. She whispered, her voice barely breaking through the sound of raindrops hitting the ground. She didn't even know the man's name, yet he stood there, holding her hand like it mattered. "I'm here," he said softly, as though that single statement could encapsulate everything she felt. Their hands connected, grounding her in that moment. An emotional barrier began to dissolve, something she never thought possible in a sea of overwhelming sorrow. "You understand," she thought. "I've been where you are," he continued, his voice low and filled with empathy. "I lost someone close to me not long ago." His admission struck a chord deep within her. How often had she felt alone, trapped in this tidal wave of grief? Here stood a man who felt the same stab of pain, who had journeyed through the labyrinth of sorrow. Sarah asked, her heart racing, "How do I cope with this?" He paused, contemplating his answer. "You start by allowing yourself to feel," he said, meeting her gaze earnestly. "Allow the tears to flow. Grief is not linear, it ebbs and flows like the tides." As tears streamed down her face, Sarah felt an unfamiliar sensation, a sliver of light piercing through the shadow. "It's okay to cry," she thought. "I can't imagine life without her," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to him. The overwhelming ache in her chest felt sharper than ever. "By holding on to those memories," he replied, squeezing her hand tightly. In that moment, Sarah's mind drifted back to her mother, her warm laughter, the light in her eyes when she spoke about simple joys. Suddenly, the memories didn't feel like knives anymore. They felt like threads weaving through her mind, binding her to the woman who had shaped her world. A slight breeze rustled the trees, and for the first time since her mother had passed, she felt a fragile sense of tranquility wash over her. The stranger was right. Clara would want her to find joy in the memories, to continue living, to allow the love they shared to guide her through the darkness. "I can do that," she whispered. As they stood there, hand in hand, something profound shifted within her. The feeling of being grounded in the presence of a stranger had transformed into a deep, unfamiliar sense of connection. The rain, once oppressive, felt more like cleansing, purifying, washing away layers of unresolved grief. But as quickly as the moment began, Lydia felt the world rushing back in. The crowd was beginning to gather their belongings as the service came to an end. She looked at the man, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I can't thank you enough," she said, her voice stronger now. He smiled, warmth radiating from him. "Just remember that you're not alone." Sarah opened her mouth to ask for his name, to hold on to this moment for as long as she could, but he was already weaving back into the crowd, fading away like a whisper of smoke. She called, panic edging into her voice, but as she reached out, he was already gone, swallowed up by the sea of mourners who continued to shuffle away, lost in their own grief. For a moment, Sarah felt deflated, like a balloon slowly losing air, but then she realized something profound. The encounter had sparked a glimmer of hope. It reminded her she was capable of finding joy in her memories. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah struggled to navigate the abyss of sorrow, but the memory of that brief encounter remained etched in her mind. She began to embrace the memories of her mother with newfound vigor. She started a memory box, filling it with letters, photographs, and trinkets, little tokens of her mother's life. Every weekend, she would sit by the window, listening to their favorite songs, allowing herself to feel that connection once more. Each stitch of memory began to mend her fractured heart thread by thread. One afternoon, while going for a walk to clear her mind, she stumbled upon a small park. The sun cast a golden hue upon everything, and a gentle breeze kissed her cheeks. As she settled on a bench, she closed her eyes, lost in thought. When she opened them again, she did a double take. There, just a few steps away, stood the stranger, the man she had met at her mother's funeral. He seemed as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Hey," he said, taking a step closer, a familiar warmth returning. She replied, a smile breaking across her face. "Seems like it's written in the stars," he said, returning her smile. "I've been trying," she admitted, her heart fluttering with the revelation of just how much she had missed him. He nodded, his expression shifting into one of understanding and appreciation. "That's wonderful to hear." They talked for hours in that park, enveloped in a cocoon of laughter and shared stories. With every word, Sarah felt a connection deepening, a bond forged in shared grief that was transforming into something altogether lighter. Gradually, the shadows of her sadness began to fade, replaced by a warmth she had thought was lost forever. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah found herself seeking out Jack more often, sometimes at the park, sometimes at cozy coffee shops, anywhere their paths could cross. Each encounter was a reminder of how far she had come since that fateful day. Together, they reveled in bittersweet stories of loss, their conversations weaving joy and pain into a beautiful tapestry of life experience. Jack became a source of strength for her, encouraging her to embrace life fully. He would often ask, "Live my life to the fullest," she would reply, a gentle wisdom growing within her. With his encouragement, Sarah began to embrace new experiences, rediscovering passions she had long buried under the weight of grief. She enrolled in a pottery class, started painting, and even began volunteering at a local shelter. And while her pain didn't vanish, she learned to carry it differently. The memories of her mother became a source of strength rather than a burden, reminding her to celebrate life even when it felt overwhelming. One starry night, as they sat on a rooftop sharing stories and laughter, Sarah felt a rush of emotions. The sky stretched out above them like an unending canvas, and the lights of the city twinkled like stars. Looking at Jack, she felt a warmth in her heart that eclipsed every fear she had harbored since her mother's passing. She asked suddenly a question she had long pondered but never vocalized. Jack turned to her, his gaze thoughtful. "I think our energy stays with the people we love." She pondered this, staring into the vast expanse above them. "Absolutely," he replied, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Sarah's heart raced as she processed his words. "I never thought of it that way." Jack reached out, his fingers intertwining with hers, warmth flooding her chest. In that soft moment, Sarah felt a rush of hope and the blossoming of something new, something beautiful. She leaned over, her heart racing as she kissed him softly, feeling a connection deeper than she ever imagined possible. Weeks turned into months, and soon they were inseparable. They traveled together, explored new horizons, shared dreams, and created new memories. Jack became more than just a friend. He became a partner in her ongoing journey, someone who understood the importance of love and loss. And through it all, as she cherished every moment, Sarah knew that her mother was watching over her, guiding her along this extraordinary path. The grief that had once consumed her transformed into something that shaped her into a deeper, stronger version of herself. At each sunset, as they held hands and reflected on their lives, she knew that love never truly dies. It evolves, takes shape, and transforms into new beginnings. And sometimes, out of the darkness, a stranger could walk into your life just when you needed it the most, reminding you that the journey of healing is one meant to be shared, full of both joy and sorrow, love and laughter. And in the end, that's how Sarah learned to embrace life, equipped with memories forged in love and the strength found in a stranger who took her hand without a word. reminding her that sometimes the most powerful connections emerge in the most unexpected places. The air was thick with sorrow, an almost tangible weight pressing down on the gathered crowd. The sky mirrored the mood, a heavy blanket of gray looming overhead, threatening to unleash its own cascade of tears. Emily stood enveloped in a black coat, her gaze fixed on the somber scene before her mother's coffin, draped in roses, the vibrant colors a stark contrast to the darkness surrounding them. Her heart felt shattered, pieces scattered across a landscape of memories that both comforted and tormented her. Today was supposed to be a farewell, yet it felt more like an unbearable void, an emptiness that consumed the very essence of her being. As the officiant spoke solemnly about love and loss, Emily's mind wandered, caught between the harsh reality and the beautiful memories of her mother. The soft laughter during family cookouts, the late-night talks filled with wisdom, and the countless hugs exchanged with a warmth that could chase away the coldest of days, those moments flickered through her mind like fireflies in the night. And now that light had been extinguished. She felt like a leaf adrift in a storm, helpless against the swirling winds of grief. Then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a figure approaching the stranger. He was tall, with a strong presence that drew her attention even as her soul felt heavy. His dark coat flapped slightly in the wind, and though he walked through the crowd of mourners, he seemed to exist outside of it, focused solely on her. Emily felt a flicker of curiosity and confusion as he made his way toward her, his expression earnest and sincere. She wondered, heart racing. As he drew closer, every detail about him stood out, the way his eyes held a depth of understanding, the quiet determination in his steps. She didn't know what to expect, but what happened next caught her completely off guard. Without a word, he reached for her hand. Time slipped away as she looked at him, feeling the warmth of his grasp envelop her. This simple gesture felt monumental, as if he were anchoring her back to reality, where her mother still existed in the stories they shared and the laughter they once had. In that moment, it was as if he had stepped into her grief, offering a lifeline. Emily managed to whisper, plagued by the urgency to understand why this stranger had chosen to approach her in such an emotional moment. "I'm just someone who understands," he replied, his voice low and steady. "I lost my mother too." The words hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. How could a stranger understand the storm inside her? How could he grasp the depth of her sorrow without even knowing her? But there was honesty in his eyes, an appreciation for the raw vulnerability they both shared in that moment. Tears welled up and Emily looked down at their hands, noticing how his grip remained solid, a reassurance in the quicksand of her grief. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It starts with allowing yourself to grieve," he said, his voice almost a whisper as if he was aware of the sacredness of the moment. "It's okay to feel lost, it's part of the journey, but remember, the love you shared is still with you." A light flickered within her, a memory of laughter echoed in her heart, the warmth of her mother's smile illuminated the paths of her life. Maybe he was right, the love wouldn't vanish, it would transform, taking on new shapes as she moved through her life. She asked, a mix of desperation and curiosity in her eyes. "By celebrating her life, by remembering the joy she brought to you and others," he answered. "All the laughter, the lessons." Their fingers still intertwined, Emily felt a connection that transcended the chaos surrounding them. Suddenly, she wasn't a lone figure lost in grief. She was part of a shared experience, a thread woven into the larger tapestry of love and loss. The rain began to ease, the clouds slowly parting to allow rays of sunlight to cascade down upon them. "I want to remember," she said, determination edging into her voice. "I know," he replied, his expression softening, "but it also carries a beauty. Even among the pain lies a gratitude for having known her." For the first time since the funeral began, Emily felt something shift within her, a glimmer of hope ignited by his reassurance. Perhaps moving forward wasn't about forgetting, it was about honoring her mother by embracing everything she had left behind. As the service began to drift toward its conclusion, Emily could feel the tide of reality rushing back in. The stranger's hand slipped from hers. "Wait," she called out, urgency rising within her. "Daniel," he said with a gentle smile, a fleeting comfort before he stepped away into the gathering crowd. She managed to shout after him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and loss as he disappeared into the sea of black coats. Days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself reflecting on that brief encounter, the stranger who had taken her hand at the funeral. An entire month passed, yet she felt a magnetic pull to honor her mother's memory, promised to herself that she would carry the love forward. She began by creating a scrapbook filled with photographs, quotes, and letters she had shared with her mother. Each page was a journey through the fabric of their lives together. She cooked her mother's favorite meals, each aroma drifting through the house serving as a reminder of the love that had once filled their home. One snowy afternoon, while she flipped through old photographs, she suddenly remembered Daniel. His genuine warmth had been like a beacon during her darkest hour. She mused, contemplating the encouragement he had imparted. And then on a whim, she decided to return to the park where they had first met. Maybe it was silly, but the thought of revisiting that moment made her heart swell with hope. The sun was setting as she walked through the familiar pathways, the crunch of leaves underfoot reminding her of the beauty in small moments. As she neared the spot where they had stood together, she felt her heart race. And then she saw him, Daniel, standing near a bench, seemingly lost in thought. She called, a rush of relief cascading over her. He turned, his eyes brightening at the sight of her. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, the warmth flooding back into his voice. "For the first time in a while, I feel okay," she responded, her heart lifting. "I've been honoring my mother, remembering the joy she brought." A genuine smile spread across his face. "That's wonderful. It's all about finding ways to keep her spirit alive." As they settled on the bench under the warm glow of the setting sun, Emily shared the stories she had begun to craft, pouring out laughter and memories. Daniel listened intently, nodding along as she spoke. "You're bringing her back to life, Emily," he said, a hint of admiration in his tone. Their eyes locked, and in that moment something shifted again. It was as if they both understood the depth of what they had shared, their bonds forged through pain. And for the first time, Emily felt gratitude toward the universe for the stranger who had wandered into her life. "Thank you for reaching out that day," she said, her voice steady and sincere. Daniel leaned slightly closer, a seriousness in his expression. "I'm just glad you found your way." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, Emily suddenly felt the warmth of vulnerability wrap around them. The world spun away, leaving just the two of them, two souls intertwined in shared loss, yet bound together by hope. She asked, her heart racing as the words tumbled out. "Can we keep meeting?" Daniel's eyes sparkled. "Absolutely." Weeks turned into months, and every meeting with Daniel felt like a breath of fresh air. They wandered through parks, shared meals, and discussed everything, joys, dreams, and memories, both lost and found. With each encounter, their bond deepened. It wasn't just friendship, it started to blossom into something alive and beautiful. One evening, they found themselves sitting on the same bench, laughter dancing between them as they reminisced about their favorite childhood memories. Joy surged within Emily, and for the first time since her mother's passing, she felt a sense of belonging. Emily asked suddenly, her gaze fixed on the stars that began to shimmer in the night sky. "I believe they do," said Daniel, sincere. Emily pondered his words, feeling warmth wash over her. With every shared laugh, every secret exchanged, she realized how much she had grown since meeting him, a testimony to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of connection amidst sorrow. Weeks turned into a season, and on the anniversary of her mother's passing, she decided to host a small gathering, an evening to celebrate the woman who had shaped her life. It would be a blend of remembrance and joy, with stories exchanged and laughter filling the air. As the sun set, illuminating the horizon, friends and family gathered in her home, creating a tapestry of warmth and love. They shared meals, laughter, and countless stories. Emily felt her heart swell as she listened to her mother's friends recall memories, each tale wrapped in phrases laced with love. Halfway through the evening, Daniel arrived, bringing with him a bouquet of sunflowers, the flower Emily's mother had adored. The sight of him ignited something deep within her, a renewed sense of possibility. "Beautiful gathering," he said, eyes scanning the room filled with smiling faces. "Thank you for being here," she replied, each word imbued with sincerity. They moved into a quiet corner, simply observing the joy in the room. "It feels like she's here," Emily whispered, emotion thickening her voice. "She is," Daniel assured gently, in every shared laugh and every tear shed. Emily felt a surge of gratitude, reflecting on the journey they had both shared. In that moment, surrounded by warmth, she realized the past year had transformed her life. The pain had reshaped her, but so had the love that had entered her life when she least expected it. With newfound resolve, she turned to Daniel and took his hand, no words needed, just a simple gesture that spoke volumes. In that electric moment, the world around them faded and she leaned closer, feeling the warmth radiating between them. As they locked eyes, the future beckoned, a thrilling union of love and memories intertwined. Though loss had initially loomed large, the journey ahead sparkled with potential, a tapestry woven through loss and newfound hope. Together, they faced the unknown, hearts wide open, prepared to embrace whatever came next. Life in all its beautiful complexity unfolded before them, and Emily knew she had the strength to face it, guided by the love she carried forward, entwined with the love she had discovered anew. Rain drummed relentlessly against the pavement, each drop echoing the sorrow that filled the air. Among a sea of black umbrellas stood Lily, her heart heavy with grief as she stared at the wooden casket adorned with white lilies. Today was supposed to be about honoring her father, but instead, it felt like her world was slowly crumbling around her. The funeral had drawn a crowd, friends and family gathered to pay their respects. Yet as Lily stood surrounded by loved ones, she felt achingly alone. The whispers of sadness surrounded her, muffled voices filled with condolences, but the words felt empty, like echoes in a vast canyon. All she could think about was the void where her father used to be, his laughter now just a haunting memory. As the officiant spoke about life and loss, Lily's mind drifted to all the cherished moments that slipped through her fingers, like sand fishing trips on lazy Sundays, late-night talks under the stars, the warm embrace that could make any bad day melt away. Tears blurred her vision as she resisted the urge to scream, to shake the world around her and demand that it make sense again. And then she saw him, a stranger emerging from the shadows of the trees, his tall frame cutting through the crowd. He was handsome but unassuming, dressed in a plain black coat that absorbed the dreary atmosphere. What struck her most were his eyes, expressing a depth of understanding she yearned for but didn't know how to articulate. Before she could process his presence, he stepped toward her, his gaze unwavering. As he got closer, the noise around her quieted, each sob and murmur faded as if the world had blurred at its edges. He reached out, his hand hovering slightly above hers, and without a single word exchanged, he entwined his fingers with hers. It was a simple gesture, yet it felt monumental. For the first time since her father's passing, Lily felt something other than sadness. A flicker of warmth sparked within her, a connection that threaded through the dense fog of her grief. She looked up at him, her breath hitching in surprise. She questioned, her voice trembling but curious. "I'm just someone who understands loss," he replied, his voice soothing yet firm. The honesty in his words struck a chord deep within her. How could a stranger comprehend the depths of her sorrow? But as she clung to his hand, the strength of his grip reminded her she wasn't alone, not in this moment. She whispered, the vulnerability evident in her eyes. "By allowing yourself to feel," he said softly. "It's okay to break, it's okay to cry." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but amidst the sorrow she felt a sense of release, a cathartic wave washing over her. His words were like a lifeline, and for the first time she began to realize that coping with grief didn't mean suppressing her emotions. It meant honoring her father through tears, laughter, and memories. "I don't know how to do this," she said, her voice muffled by despair. "Remember the joy," he urged, squeezing her hand gently. "Every moment you shared, every lesson learned, let those memories guide you." As they stood together, hand in hand under the gray sky, something inside Lily flickered to life. She began to visualize those moments as colorful threads woven into the fabric of her heart. The laughter, the love, they would always be a part of her. But just as these thoughts began to anchor her, the world around her started to shift again. The crowd was beginning to disperse, the service drawing to a close. Lily felt the warmth of the stranger's hand slip away, and suddenly she feared losing this fleeting connection. "Wait," she called after him, desperation lacing her voice. "Jason," he turned partially, glancing back at her. "Thank you, Jason." "Thank you for being here," she called, but he had already melted into the gathering, lost among faces she had known her whole life and yet felt disconnected from. The rain began to drizzle again as the mood shifted, a sudden cloudburst, cold and unforgiving. Lily remained standing at the edge of the gathering, a wave of vulnerability washing over her. The weight of her loss came crashing back, and she felt her heart spiral into despair once more. Days passed, and the ache of her father's absence nested deep within her chest. She spent countless nights at the dinner table, an empty chair across from her, memories flooding her mind. This was supposed to be her safe space, but it felt like a hollow reminder of what could never be again. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of Jason's presence, the way he had somehow felt like a lifeline. One rainy evening, unable to sleep, Lily found herself restless, mind racing. Against her better judgment, she decided to visit the park where she had met Jason, hoping to catch a glimpse of that stranger who had brought her a moment of peace. The park was eerily quiet, but the air hummed with something electric. She wandered the paths, the leaves rustling softly underfoot as droplets dripped gently from the trees. As she turned the corner, she froze. There stood Jason, leaning against a tree, the faint outline of a smile gracing his lips as he noticed her. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, his voice steady despite the chill in the air. "I don't know," she admitted, feeling a weight lift as he pulled her hand into his once more. "I've been struggling." He nodded, patience and understanding radiating from him. "It takes time, you know. I didn't realize how alone I felt until I met you," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "You're stronger than you think," he replied softly. His words echoed within her, a gentle reminder that she didn't have to navigate this path alone. The cold air between them charged with unspoken understanding, solidifying the bond they had begun to weave together. She asked, her voice almost a whisper, vulnerability bleeding through. "Can we keep talking?" "I would like that very much," Jason said, his gaze steady. "I'll be here whenever you need. Just remember that love is woven through every memory, every tear." Time moved swiftly, and as the weeks turned into months, each encounter with Jason became a lifeline for her. They shared stories of loss, forged connections meant to guide them through their pain. He understood her struggles in ways that no one else could, gently coaxing her out of her shell. One evening, as they strolled through that same park, the trees illuminated by soft lights, Lily turned to him with newfound courage. She asked, her heart racing as she awaited his response. "Absolutely," he replied, his expression earnest. "Love transforms, it doesn't disappear." They paused near a fountain, the water dancing in the moonlight. The electricity in the air was palpable, and instinctively Lily reached for his hand, allowing the moment to linger. "I feel something amazing when I'm with you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason tilted his head slightly, and for a heartbeat, she thought he might lean in. But then he hesitated, pulling away just a fraction. "We should take our time, Lily." Lily felt the warmth in her chest, but also a sense of loss wash over her as his words sunk in. He's right, she thought, but the world around them shifted once again, and as they parted that night, an unexpected chill ran down her spine. In the days that followed, Lily remained lost in thoughts of Jason, the unexpected light he had brought to her life, but a sense of unease began to creep in. Was she really ready to open her heart again? She felt a mix of excitement and hesitation at the notion of exploring a deeper connection. Then one particularly gray afternoon, she received an alarming phone call. The voice on the other end was familiar. "Emily," it said, urgency in the tone. "You need to come home." Her heart pounded as she processed the words, fear gripping her. Her voice trembled, panic rising like a tidal wave. "I'm so sorry." The news shattered her. Her uncle, another pillar of her family, suddenly gone. She felt the ground shift beneath her, grief crashing down on her like a wave, pulling her into darkness. Stay strong, she reminded herself, but the struggle felt insurmountable. As she drove back home, a storm brewed inside her: rage, despair, confusion. All the pain she had begun to overcome came rushing back, threatening to drown her. The funeral was another sea of black attire and somber faces, yet amidst the sorrow she locked eyes with Jason. He stood there, a solitary figure, his gaze filled with concern. It was as if he could sense her turmoil, and without hesitation he moved toward her. This time he didn't take her hand. Instead, he stepped close, wrapping her in an embrace that felt like home. "I'm here," he whispered, grounding her amidst the chaos. But then, as the service began, something shifted again. As the officiant spoke, she saw her mother break down in tears, and that sight pulled at Lily's heart. That was it. Every moment from the past month, the laughter, the learning, the growth, felt fragile in the face of this new wave of loss. Suddenly, the air shifted. The ground beneath her felt shaky, and amidst the crowd, tension tightened the atmosphere. She caught a glimpse of her mother moving away from the rest of the family, her face pale and etched with worry. Following her gaze, Lily felt an unsettling sense of foreboding. "Something's not right," she whispered to Jason, her voice trembling. He nodded, concern etching his sharp features. "Stay close." As her mother stepped outside, Lily and Jason followed, a darkness lurking around the corners of the hall. They pushed through the doors, stepping into the open air, their breaths mingling with the chill of uncertainty. Lily called out, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. She felt fear creep up her spine, a whisper of something sinister waiting just out of sight. Then she saw it. A car parked just outside, its headlights casting long shadows that danced like spirits come to haunt them. A figure sat inside, cloaked in darkness, and in their eyes glinted something that made her blood run cold. She shouted, panic sweeping through her, but before she could take another step, a hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. It was Jason, a stern look on his face. "Wait," her heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, but the moment hung in the air, thick with tension. There was something ominous about that car, about the figure inside. The world around them felt fragile, teetering on the edge of a precipice, and fear wrapped around her heart like a vice. Her mother cried out, breaking free from the shadows. But it was too late. With a quick motion, the figure emerged, and in that instant, Lily's world began to unravel, darkness spilling forth like a nightmare come to life. As Jason stepped in front of Lily, every instinct told her they were stepping into a storm. Would she have the strength to face this new blow? Would they be able to withstand the wave of chaos that threatened to wash them away? In that charged moment, with all their lives colliding, one question loomed. What came next would change everything they thought they knew.